I thought I was living a fairy tale until I accidentally overheard a phone call that shattered everything I believed about my relationship and my future. The discovery happened 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday evening. I had come home early from work with a splitting headache and decided to grab some medicine from the bathroom upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear my fiancé talking on the phone in our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and something in his tone made me pause. He was speaking in that hushed, conspiratorial way people use when they're sharing secrets they shouldn't. At first, I couldn't make out the words clearly, but then I heard my name. My stomach dropped as I realized he was talking to his mother. I pressed myself against the wall and listened, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid he might hear it through the door. What I heard next changed everything. He was telling his mother how I was too clingy, how I constantly needed attention, and how he sometimes wondered if he was making a mistake. He complained that I was always wanting to spend time together instead of giving him space with his friends. He said I was too emotional and that I made everything about myself. The worst part was when he laughed and agreed with something his mother said about me being high maintenance. I stood there frozen, feeling like someone had punched me in the gut. This was the man I was supposed to marry in 6 months. The man who told me every day that he loved me and couldn't wait to start our life together. The man who had proposed to me on a beach in California just 8 months earlier, telling me I was his everything and that he'd never been happier. I quietly made my way back downstairs and sat on the couch, trying to process what I had just heard. My hands were shaking, and I felt sick to my stomach. When he came downstairs 20 minutes later, acting completely normal and asking about my day, I could barely look at him. I mumbled something about my headache and went to bed early. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. I started paying attention to his interactions with his family differently. I noticed how he would step outside to take calls from his mother, something that had never bothered me before but now seemed suspicious. I realized that every time we had plans with his family, there was always some kind of tension or awkwardness that I had previously attributed to normal family dynamics. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had been signs I had been ignoring. His sister had always been somewhat cold to me, making passive-aggressive comments that I had brushed off as just her personality. His mother was polite but distant, and I had always felt like I was trying too hard to win her approval. Now I understood why nothing I did ever seemed good enough for them. I decided I needed to know more before confronting him. I started paying closer attention to his phone calls and his behavior after family gatherings. What I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. He had been systematically complaining about me to his entire family for months, maybe even longer. A week after the initial discovery, I was doing laundry when his phone, which he had left on the bed, started buzzing with text messages. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I looked at the screen and saw a group chat with his siblings. The messages were about our upcoming engagement party, but what I saw made my blood run cold. His brother had written something about hoping I wouldn't make a scene at the party like I apparently had at his cousin's wedding last month. I had no idea what he was talking about. At that wedding, I had been nothing but polite and friendly. I had helped his aunt with decorations and had spent most of the evening making sure everyone was having a good time. But apparently, my fiancé had told them I had been dramatic and attention-seeking. His sister had responded with a laughing emoji and a comment about how I probably would find some way to make the engagement party about myself too. The messages went on, with various family members making jokes and comments about me that made it clear this was a regular topic of conversation for them. I felt completely humiliated and betrayed. Not only had my fiancé been talking behind my back, but he had been painting me as this horrible, selfish person to people who were supposed to become my family. I realized that every family gathering I had attended, every holiday dinner, every casual get-together, they had all been looking at me through the lens of whatever lies he had been telling them. That night, I confronted him. I told him I had overheard his conversation with his mother and had seen the text messages. At first, he tried to deny it, Then he got defensive and said I was violating his privacy by listening to his calls and looking at his phone. He said I was being paranoid and making a big deal out of nothing. But when I pressed him for details about what exactly I had done that was so terrible, he couldn't give me any real examples. He just kept saying that sometimes he needed to vent to his family and that everyone complains about their partners sometimes. He insisted that it didn't mean anything and that of course he loved me and wanted to marry me. I told him that there was a difference between occasionally venting about normal relationship issues and systematically destroying someone's reputation with lies and exaggerations. I asked him to give me specific examples of when I had been clingy or attention-seeking or dramatic. He couldn't do it because, as I suspected, most of what he had been telling them was either completely made up or severely distorted versions of normal interactions. The conversation went on for hours. He kept trying to minimize what he had done, saying I was overreacting and that his family loved me despite what I had heard. But I could see the truth in his eyes. He had been using me as a scapegoat for whatever issues he was having, and his family had been more than happy to join in. What made it even worse was realizing that some of the things he had complained about were actually things I had been doing to try to make him happy. I had been planning surprise dates and trying to spend quality time together because I thought that's what couples in love did. I had been emotional and open with him because I trusted him completely. I had been enthusiastic about family events because I wanted to fit in and be accepted. The next few days were a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I kept replaying every interaction I had ever had with his family, seeing them all in a new light. I remembered his mother's tight smiles and his sister's backhanded compliments. I thought about all the times I had tried so hard to impress them, bringing homemade desserts to dinners and remembering everyone's birthdays, only to be met with polite but distant responses. I realized that I had been living in a completely different reality than the one he had been presenting to his family. In my mind, we were a happy couple planning our future together, working through normal relationship challenges with love and understanding. In his version, I was some kind of burden that he was nobly tolerating while secretly resenting everything about me. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I honestly didn't think things could get worse, but they did. After our confrontation, my fiancé seemed to think everything was resolved. He apologized and promised he would talk to his family and clear things up. He said he would make sure they knew how wonderful I was and that he had been wrong to complain about me. But something about his apology felt hollow. He kept focusing on how I had invaded his privacy rather than acknowledging the real damage he had done. He seemed more upset about getting caught than about hurting me. Still, I wanted to believe him because I loved him and we had been together for 3 years. I thought maybe this could be a turning point for us. Boy, was I wrong. Last weekend was his nephew's birthday party, and he insisted we go together. He said it would be a perfect opportunity to show his family how great we were as a couple and to start rebuilding those relationships. I was nervous but hopeful. I spent the whole week planning what to wear and thinking about how to approach conversations with his family members. The party was at his brother's house, and from the moment we walked in, I could feel the tension. His mother gave me the same tight smile she always did, but now I knew what was behind it. His sister barely acknowledged me beyond a quick hello. I tried to stay positive and focus on the kids, helping with games and making sure everyone was having fun. Everything seemed to be going okay until I went to the kitchen to get some water. His sister-in-law was there with 2 of his cousins, and they didn't notice me come in. I heard my name and froze in the doorway, hidden behind the kitchen island. They were talking about the engagement party, which was still planned for next month. His sister-in-law was saying how she felt bad for me because I obviously had no idea what his family really thought of me. One of his cousins mentioned that his mother had been hoping he would come to his senses and call off the engagement before it was too late. But the worst part was when his sister-in-law revealed that he had been asking his family for advice about how to break up with me without seeming like the bad guy. She said he had been complaining that I was getting too serious too fast and that he felt trapped by the engagement. Apparently, he had been telling them that he proposed because I had been dropping hints and he felt pressured, not because he actually wanted to marry me. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All this time, while I had been planning our wedding and our future together, he had been strategizing with his family about how to escape from me. The betrayal was so deep and complete that I couldn't even process it all at once. I somehow made it through the rest of the party, but I was operating on autopilot. I smiled and made small talk, but inside I was completely numb. When we got home that night, I told him I needed some space to think. He seemed relieved, which told me everything I needed to know. I've been staying at my sister's house for the past week, trying to figure out what to do next. My sister has been amazing, letting me cry and vent without judgment while also helping me see the situation clearly. She pointed out that this wasn't just about the badmouthing, it was about a fundamental lack of respect and honesty in our relationship. The more I think about it, the more I realize that there were other signs I had been ignoring. He had been pulling away physically and emotionally for months. He had been less enthusiastic about wedding planning, always finding excuses to postpone decisions or delegate tasks to me. He had been spending more time with his friends and less time with me, and when I brought it up, he would accuse me of being clingy just like he had been telling his family. I also started remembering conversations we had had about our future that now seemed suspicious. When I would talk about wanting kids someday, he would get quiet or change the subject. When I mentioned wanting to buy a house together, he would say we should wait and see how things went. At the time, I thought he was just being practical, but now I wonder if he was already planning his exit strategy. The hardest part is accepting that the man I fell in love with might not have ever really existed. The sweet, caring, devoted partner I thought I knew was apparently just a facade he maintained while secretly resenting me and planning to leave. I keep questioning every memory, every moment of happiness we shared, wondering what was real and what was just him going through the motions. My friends have been supportive but divided on what I should do. Some think I should give him another chance and try to work through this with couples counseling. Others think I should run as fast as I can and never look back. But the decision feels bigger than just whether to forgive him or not. It's about whether I can ever trust him again, and whether I want to marry into a family that has spent months talking behind my back and hoping I would disappear. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I want my life to look like, and I'm starting to realize that I deserve better than this. I deserve a partner who speaks about me with love and respect, even when I'm not around. I deserve a family that welcomes me with open arms, not one that tolerates me while secretly hoping I'll go away. I deserve someone who is proud to be with me, not someone who feels trapped by our relationship. Update 2. 3 weeks have passed since my last update, and I'm writing this from my new apartment. Yes, you read that right, I moved out completely and ended the engagement. But the story of how I got here is even more shocking than anything I've shared so far. After staying at my sister's house for a week, I decided I needed to go back to our place to get more of my things and have a serious conversation about our future. I had been doing a lot of soul-searching and had come to the conclusion that while I was hurt and angry, I still loved him and wanted to try to work things out if he was willing to be completely honest and make real changes. I called him and told him I was coming over to talk. He sounded nervous but agreed. When I got there, I could tell he had been expecting this conversation. He had cleaned the house and even bought flowers, which should have been sweet but somehow felt manipulative given everything that had happened. We sat down in the living room, and I told him how I was feeling and what I needed from him if we were going to move forward. I said I needed him to be completely honest about what he had been telling his family and why. I needed him to take responsibility for the damage he had done to my relationships with them. And I needed him to commit to rebuilding trust by being transparent about his communications with them going forward. He seemed to be listening and nodding in all the right places. He apologized again and said he understood why I was hurt. He promised he would do whatever it took to make this right. But then I asked him a simple question that changed everything. I asked him if he actually wanted to marry me or if he felt trapped by the engagement. The silence that followed was deafening. He couldn't look me in the eyes, and I could see him struggling to find the right words. Finally, He admitted that he had been having doubts about our relationship for a while but hadn't known how to bring it up. He said he did love me, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for marriage and the level of commitment I wanted. This was progress, I thought. At least he was being honest. I told him I appreciated his honesty and that maybe we could work through his doubts together. Maybe we could postpone the wedding and take things slower. I was willing to do whatever it took to save our relationship. But then he dropped a bomb that I never saw coming. He told me that there was something else I needed to know, something that would probably change how I felt about everything. My heart started racing because I could tell from his tone that this was going to be bad. He confessed that 6 months ago, he had reconnected with his college girlfriend through social media. What started as innocent catching up had evolved into something more. They had been texting regularly, talking on the phone, and had even met up in person twice when she was in town for work. He swore that nothing physical had happened, but he admitted that he had developed feelings for her again. I felt like I was in a movie or a bad dream. This couldn't be happening to me. Not only had he been badmouthing me to his family and questioning our engagement, but he had also been emotionally cheating on me with his ex-girlfriend. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that I couldn't even speak for several minutes. He kept talking, trying to explain and justify what he had done. He said he had been confused about his feelings and hadn't meant for it to happen. He said he had been trying to figure out what he wanted before saying anything to me. He insisted that he had never intended to hurt me and that he had been planning to cut off contact with his ex and recommit to our relationship. But I could see through all of his excuses. The timeline he was giving me meant that he had been talking to his ex-girlfriend during the entire period when he had been complaining about me to his family. He had been comparing me to her and finding me lacking. He had been questioning our relationship while building an emotional connection with someone else. The pieces started falling into place in the most painful way. His complaints about me being too clingy made sense now. He had been pulling away because he was investing his emotional energy elsewhere. His doubts about our engagement weren't about commitment in general, they were about commitment to me specifically when he was wondering if he should be with someone else. I asked him if his family knew about his ex-girlfriend, and his face told me everything I needed to know. Of course they knew. They had probably been encouraging him to reach out to her. They had probably been hoping that this other relationship would give him the excuse he needed to end things with me. That's when everything clicked. The badmouthing, the family's coldness toward me, the doubts about our engagement, it had all been part of a larger pattern of him checking out of our relationship while keeping me in the dark. He had been building a case against me with his family while building a case for his ex-girlfriend in his own mind. I stood up and told him that we were done. Not just taking a break, not postponing the wedding, but completely finished. He tried to argue with me, saying that he had been honest with me and that we could work through this. He said he would cut off all contact with his ex and prove that he wanted to be with me. But I was done listening to his promises and explanations. I had heard enough lies and half-truths to last a lifetime. I told him that I deserved someone who didn't have to convince himself to be with me, someone who didn't need to explore other options to appreciate what he had, and someone who would defend me to his family instead of using them as a sounding board for his complaints. I spent the next few hours packing up my essential belongings while he followed me around the house, alternating between apologizing and trying to convince me I was making a mistake. He kept saying that every couple goes through rough patches and that we could get through this if we just tried hard enough. But I realized that this wasn't a rough patch, this was who he really was. This was a man who would say whatever he thought I wanted to hear while doing whatever he actually wanted to do. This was a man who would make promises he had no intention of keeping and who would blame me for problems he had created. The hardest part was taking off my engagement ring. Despite everything that had happened, that ring had represented so many hopes and dreams for our future together. But as I placed it on the kitchen counter, I felt a sense of relief mixed in with the sadness. I was finally free from the exhausting work of trying to be good enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't. I've been in my new place for 2 weeks now, and while it's been difficult, I'm starting to feel like myself again. I'm not constantly wondering if I'm being too clingy or too emotional. I'm not walking on eggshells, trying to avoid giving him something new to complain about to his family. I'm not competing with a ghost from his past for his attention and affection. My sister helped me find this apartment, and my friends have been amazing about helping me move and get settled. It's a small one-bedroom place, but it's mine, and I love the sense of independence and possibility it represents. I've been decorating it exactly how I want, without having to consider anyone else's preferences or opinions. Final update. It's been 2 months since I ended my engagement, and I'm writing this final update because I want to share what I've learned and how my life has changed. But first, I need to tell you about the most shocking discovery of all, one that made me realize just how lucky I am to be out of that situation. About 3 weeks ago, I was having coffee with a mutual friend who had been at several gatherings with my ex-fiancé's family. She had been supportive throughout my breakup but had been careful not to take sides or share too much information. However, something had been bothering her, and she finally decided to tell me the truth about what she had witnessed. Apparently, the situation with his family was even worse than I had imagined. She told me that at his cousin's wedding, the same one where I had supposedly made a scene, his mother had actually been making jokes about me to other relatives. She had been imitating the way I laughed and making comments about how I was trying too hard to fit in. His sister had joined in, and they had spent a good portion of the reception making fun of my dress, my hair, and even the way I ate. My friend said she had been horrified and uncomfortable but didn't know how to intervene without making things worse. She said it was clear that this was a regular occurrence and that his family had been systematically tearing me down for months, not just listening to his complaints but actively participating in and encouraging them. But the most shocking revelation was about his ex-girlfriend. My friend told me that his reconnection with her hadn't been as innocent as he had made it seem. His sister had actually been the one to encourage him to reach out to her, and his mother had been pushing him to pursue that relationship instead of staying with me. They had been actively sabotaging our relationship while pretending to be supportive. Even more disturbing, my friend revealed that his ex-girlfriend had been invited to family gatherings over the past few months. While I had been trying so hard to win their approval, they had been including her in their circle and treating her like she was already part of the family. I had been competing in a game where the rules were rigged against me from the start. This information was devastating but also liberating. It confirmed that nothing I could have done would have changed the outcome. No amount of effort, kindness, or accommodation on my part would have been enough because they had already decided they didn't want me in their family. My ex-fiancé had been too cowardly to make his own decisions, so he had let his family orchestrate our breakup while he played the victim. The more I reflected on this information, the more I realized how toxic that entire family dynamic was. My ex-fiancé wasn't just a man with commitment issues or poor communication skills, he was someone who was so enmeshed with his family that he couldn't make independent decisions about his own life. He was someone who would throw his partner under the bus to maintain his standing with his family. I started to see that I hadn't just lost a fiancé, I had escaped from a lifetime of being the outsider, the scapegoat, the one who would never be good enough no matter what I did. I had escaped from holidays filled with subtle digs and passive-aggressive comments. I had escaped from a marriage where my husband would always choose his family's approval over my feelings. In the weeks that followed this revelation, I went through a range of emotions. I was angry at all of them for their cruelty and manipulation. I was sad for the time and energy I had wasted trying to win over people who had never given me a fair chance. But mostly, I was grateful that I had found out the truth before I legally tied myself to that family forever. I also started to realize how much I had changed myself to try to fit into their expectations. I had toned down my personality, second-guessed my instincts, and constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. I had been living in a constant state of anxiety, always performing rather than just being myself. Now, 2 months later, I can honestly say that I'm happier than I've been in years. I've reconnected with friends I had neglected while I was so focused on my relationship. I've started taking art classes, something I had wanted to do for years but never made time for. I've been traveling more, both alone and with friends, and I've discovered that I actually love my own company. The hardest part hasn't been missing him specifically, but rather grieving the future I thought we were going to have together. I had to let go of the mental image of our wedding, our future home, our potential children, and all the dreams we had built together. But in place of those dreams, I've started building new ones that are entirely my own. I've learned that I'm much stronger and more resilient than I ever knew. I've learned that I can trust my instincts and that when something feels wrong, it usually is. I've learned that love isn't enough if it's not built on a foundation of respect, honesty, and genuine partnership. Most importantly, I've learned what I will and won't accept in future relationships. I will never again tolerate being with someone who doesn't speak about me with love and respect, both to my face and behind my back. I will never again try to win over a family that has already decided not to like me. I will never again make myself smaller to make someone else more comfortable. My ex-fiancé has tried to contact me several times over the past 2 months. He sent texts apologizing and asking if we can talk. He's had mutual friends reach out to tell me that he's ended things with his ex-girlfriend and that he realizes he made a mistake. But I haven't responded to any of it, and I don't plan to. Some people think I'm being too harsh or that I should at least hear him out. But I know that someone who was capable of the level of deception and betrayal he showed me hasn't fundamentally changed in 2 months. The same family dynamics that influenced his behavior are still there. The same patterns of dishonesty and avoidance are still part of who he is. I'm not interested in being someone's backup plan or their second choice. I'm not interested in spending years trying to rebuild trust with someone who destroyed it so thoroughly. I'm not interested in proving my worth to people who have already shown me they don't value it. Instead, I'm focused on building a life that makes me genuinely happy. I'm focused on surrounding myself with people who appreciate and celebrate who I am, rather than trying to change me or tear me down. I'm focused on becoming the best version of myself, not for someone else's approval, but for my own fulfillment. The experience has been painful, but it's also been transformative. I've learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing, because it forces you to examine your life and make changes you might never have made otherwise. I've learned that betrayal, while devastating, can also be a gift that reveals the truth about people and situations that you might have otherwise stayed in far too long. I'm not ready to start dating again yet, and I'm not sure when I will be. But when I do, I'll be approaching relationships from a completely different perspective. I'll be looking for someone who is genuinely excited to be with me, not someone who has to convince themselves that I'm worth their time. I'll be looking for someone who includes me in their life fully, not someone who compartmentalizes me away from their family and friends. I'll be looking for someone who has my back, even when I'm not around to defend myself. Someone who builds me up rather than tearing me down. Someone who sees our relationship as a partnership rather than a burden they have to carry. Most of all, I'll be looking for someone who chooses me every day, not just when it's convenient or when they don't have other options. Someone who is proud to be with me and shows it through their actions, not just their words. I know that person exists, and I know I deserve to find them. But even if I don't, I've learned that I'm perfectly capable of creating a beautiful, fulfilling life on my own. I don't need someone else to complete me or validate my worth. I am enough, exactly as I am, and anyone who doesn't see that isn't worthy of my time or energy. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve someone who speaks about you with love and respect. You deserve a family that welcomes you with open arms. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and genuine partnership. Don't settle for less, no matter how much you love someone or how much time you've invested in the relationship. Trust your instincts, value yourself, and don't be afraid to walk away from situations that aren't serving you. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but it might also be the best decision you ever make. Sometimes losing someone who doesn't appreciate you is the first step toward finding someone who will.